How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Free Space News. And today I have kind of a pretty depressing video for you guys, I have to say. It's about a topic that most people haven't really been paying attention to lately, but it was really big in the news, like 5 years ago, and that is Ebola. So most people remember, when you hear Ebola, you think of the West Africa outbreak that happened back in 2014, 2016, and it may or may not have crossed your eye that there have been some Ebola cases in Central Africa over the past 5 years or so, some in South Sudan, some in Uganda, some in Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Congo is largely going to be the focus of today's video because the new outbreak that's occurring in northeastern Congo is already the second largest outbreak of Ebola ever. So according to the CDC, an outbreak of Ebola is occurring in North Kivu and Ituri provinces of the DRC. The DRC Ministry of Health declared this current outbreak on August 1st, 2018. North Kivu and Ituri provinces are among the most populated in the DRC. These provinces share borders with other countries, Rwanda, South Sudan, and Uganda, with frequent cross-border movement for personal travel and trade. The provinces have been experiencing a prolonged humanitarian crisis and deteriorating security, which are limiting health efforts to respond to this outbreak. The U.S. Department of State has identified this part of the country as a do-not-travel zone because of crime, Ebola, and kidnapping. So I'll show a little bit of some Vice clips. They went to, a few years ago, I think they went to North Kivu to kind of explore the conflict mineral situation that's been happening in Congo for a long time. And it's a fantastic video. I can link it down below.
The Democratic Republic of Congo. It's one of the poorest countries in the world, and thanks to an insanely complicated mix of politics, armed conflict, and corruption, it's also one of the most underreported. It also happens to be home to a nondescript black rock known as coltan, a vital ingredient in the production of nearly every cell phone and computer on the planet. Without coltan, our technology-driven lives would come to a screeching halt. And Congo has 80% of the world's supply. Congo also has cassiterite, gold, and a slew of other minerals that make the world go round. And you'd think that having so much of this stuff would be good for Congo, but the reality is far from the case. There's a reason they're called conflict minerals. Since the mid-1990s, armed groups have used these minerals to fund a series of fantastically complicated and horrifically violent wars.
We have to kill them. We have to kill them.
And as the tech boom drove up the price of these minerals, violence skyrocketed.
But the reason that this Ebola outbreak is so serious is because of these rebel forces that the article mentions. Now, if you watch the Vice video, you'll notice that a lot of these, there are many of these rebel groups that are in conflict with one another, and that this sort of silent war that's going on, silent meaning that we don't really hear about it in the Western media much, and it's not really classified as a real war, and that's why doctors going to these areas is so dangerous, and hence why it's going to be really hard to treat the Ebola virus. So a really good article from the Washington Post talks about this a little bit. So one of the groups that is most prominent in this region and what makes Congo so dangerous right now is called the Allied Democratic Forces, or ADF. Now the article says, quote, "The ADF has terrorized communities in eastern Congo for years, kidnapping children and stoking ethnic tensions. Its leadership is mostly composed of Ugandan nationals. Since last month, the Islamic State, also known as ISIS, has claimed ADF attacks as its own, saying the group is an affiliate in its so-called Central African province. Security experts have cast doubt on any tangible cooperation between the groups. The ADF has never publicly pledged any allegiance to any other group. The ADF's primary area of activity is Congo's Beni territory, where the outbreak began and where it remains most concentrated. The area is densely forested, and ADF controls a small number of remote villages there." So to begin, I mean, Congo is a very underdeveloped country, and getting to these places where the Ebola virus is most strong and treatment is most needed is already difficult because oftentimes there's no paved roads. It takes days. It can take a lot of walking to get to some of these areas. combine that with these rebel groups who don't want outsiders coming in, and you find yourself with an incredibly difficult situation in terms of trying to get doctors to these places to treat sick people. Now, another problem that I've seen a couple articles mention is that eastern Congo is home to one of Congo's biggest cities, Goma. It's a city of over 1 million people, and recently I believe that there was at least one confirmed Ebola case in Goma, which is obviously a big problem, especially in terms of Ebola spreading into neighboring countries like Rwanda. Now, how big is this Ebola outbreak? Well, according to that same Washington Post article, the outbreak will hit its first anniversary next week and has killed more than 1,700 and affected more than 2,500, according to statistics from the Congolese Health Ministry. Health workers worry that these totals are only the bare minimum estimates, as places like Oicha and Eringeit are so often inaccessible, making accurate recording and tracing of cases nearly impossible. So we don't really even know how many people have been infected, because it's very hard for even these statistics to be reported out of these areas, given how dangerous they are. Now, we in the West hear the word Ebola, and we kind of think of, it just kind of immediately invokes fear, like, you know, what if somebody in the West were to contract it? In the United States, we had a big news freak out when a couple of healthcare workers came back to the US from West Africa, and one of them died from the Ebola virus in the US. That was it. It didn't spread any further, but since one person had it, everyone kind of freaked out. And this is not to say that Ebola spreading is not a concern, but the main concern right now is not Ebola spreading to Europe or the United States or Asia or wherever. It's Ebola spreading to neighboring countries outside of Congo. I think there have been a few cases in Uganda, and it's very likely that it could spread to like Rwanda or South Sudan and other places in Africa. So I think it's important that countries like Congo maybe should consider closing their borders to kind of prevent the spread of it. But we're a long way away from actually worrying about Ebola, spreading to the West. But the little focus in the media that this issue of Ebola in Congo does get, it's not going to be on the Congolese people or the Rwandan people or the Ugandan people or whatever. It's going to be on this spreading to the West. So we really only tend to care about these things when it affects us, and not when it affects a different people group thousands of miles away from us. But largely this hasn't really gotten that much coverage from Western media yet. I mean, yeah, you see articles in the Washington Post, but have you turned on CNN and saw stories about Ebola in Congo? Not really. It's still the usual non-stop Trump/Brexit gossip. When thousands of people are dying on the other side of the planet, and there could be even more, given that it could spread into neighboring countries or within Congo itself, because this is going to be very hard to treat. I get that this was a more depressing video. I don't want to try and bring everyone down, but the world news can be very depressing sometimes, and I think my goal with this channel is to just kind of inform you guys and make people care about or learn about an issue that they didn't know as much about before. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. I want to thank you guys for watching. I will probably have some new videos up for you pretty soon, and stay tuned, and I'll see you guys in the next video.